Hi, good morning, everyone. So I hope everyone appeared for the weekly test and was able to answer the questions. Did you face any problems with respect to answering the questions? Okay, so in the previous session, we had started discussing the education sector, wherein we had covered the issues related to our school education and what were the suggestions from your national education policy. Now, the next part that we have to start is your higher education. And see, we have compartmentalized in school education and higher education. The reason is because they tend to ask specific questions that what are the problems related to higher education, for instance. So that's why we have compartmentalized. But when you go through the policy, go through everything at once. So what we did in school education was we looked at ACER report, what are the problems, and then we looked into suggestions from your national education policy. And by going through those suggestions, and basically that is the roadmap for our national education policy to be implemented, we analyze those suggestions then and there itself. So here we are going to repeat the same thing. We will look into All India survey on higher education. Then we'll try to highlight what kind of problems we have, and then we'll look into the suggestions from national education policy. So if you look at this report, this will talk about the institution density. They have multiple factors, but this is something that is important for us. So with institutional density, we'll find out in which area or in which state you have maximum number of institutions available. Then we'll talk about the gross enrollment ratio. If you remember, gross enrollment ratio was a point there in school education, but we see that close to 98% gross enrollment ratio has been achieved. But here we'll see what is the status. Then you have pupil teacher ratio, the shortage of manpower, the shortage of human resources. We do not have sufficient teachers to take care of our students. And then also the gender parity index, that what is it with respect to girl and boy students, male and female students. So what we'll do is we'll look at the observations. Again, we do not have to remember all the observations or any of the data, but you should know. I'll highlight the important ones from the observations. I see that student enrollment has been going up over the years. The number of students who are enrolling in this in higher education has been going up. Then if you look at the number of universities and number of colleges, they are also on a rising trend. But the thing is, if you look at the state-wise distribution of these colleges, you'll find that there are few states, and these are the top 10 states, where you have maximum number of students and colleges. So for instance, the number of colleges in Uttar Pradesh is the highest, and this bubble size basically indicates the same. So on one end, we have our population in the age bracket of 18 to 23, because this is the age where you ideally enroll in higher education. So in this age bracket, you see that Uttar Pradesh has the maximum number of students, but has the maximum number of colleges as well. But if you look at Bihar and West Bengal, they have quite high number of students, but the number of colleges indicated by the size of this bubble is very less. So we have regional disparity. So there were multiple graphs. You need not go through everything. We will just look at the observations of this report and try to figure out what can be the potential problems. Now, yes, there has been an increase in the number of universities and colleges, and also you find women-exclusive universities also open. So wherein only women students can take admission. The number of colleges per lakh eligible population. Eligible population is the population in this 18 to 23 age bracket has also increased. Then you see that about 43% of the universities and 61% of the colleges are there in rural areas. So one thing that we find is, yes, the number of colleges has been increasing. The number of colleges in proportion to our population have also been increasing. And there is an even spread with respect to urban and rural areas. But is this spread according to the population that stays in rural areas? That is the question. Then you'll find various regional differences, as already highlighted, that there are few states like Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, where you have maximum number of colleges and universities located. Whereas there are others like Bihar where you do not have. Then your 65% of the colleges are private colleges. So we have a good number of private colleges as well. And you remember from school education and health that when we have this high number of private colleges or high level of privatization in a sector, it will lead to some problems. And we'll see what are those problems. Then if we talk about the enrollment ratio of male and female students, we find we do not have a lot of difference. In fact, the gross enrollment ratio for female students is 27.9%, whereas it is 26.7% for male. So you remember this exception, because generally when we speak about gender parity, we generally find that it is the girl students or the female students who are lagging behind. But it is not the case. In fact, the girl students are faring better compared to your male students. Now, can someone possibly think of the reason? Why do you find gross enrollment ratio higher in female students compared to male students? Can anyone highlight the possible reasons? And also, if you see that if you move towards higher education, the gross enrollment ratio is very less. So this means that if 100 students are passing from our school education system, only 27% out of them enroll in colleges or in higher education. Okay, so Arun, you're saying marriage. Now, generally, you find that it is the female students or the girl child who is more vulnerable to early marriage. Okay, passing percentage, good observation, passing percentage from the school. Then what else? Absolutely. So male students have to go for labor. They have to take care of the financial responsibilities. Also, because of various initiatives of the government, wherein they promote girl education. And also, overall, it highlights the reducing inequality between the girl and the boys. Yes, so girls do not join the workforce, but they continue with education. And also, you see that if someone is going for higher education, the chances are they're coming from a well-off family. And also, the average age of marriage has also increased. That is also another reason, because of which you find that girl students enroll more than boy students. So, what is GR? GR is gross enrollment ratio that we were discussing during school education as well. Do we have to calculate it? Absolutely no. Yes, so we find that generally it is the female students who lag behind. But here we find in higher education, it is the female students who are actually leading. Then you also find increase in the enrollment of students belonging to OBCs, SCs, and STs. But you'll find that compared to their population and the reservation provided to them, you find that OBCs fulfill those number of seats, but SCs and STs still do not occupy those many seats. Then also, overall enrollment has increased, and the annual rate of increase in enrollment has also improved. So the basic difference is that gross enrollment ratio talks about the number of students who have enrolled in this year, whereas the rate of enrollment talks about the change that has happened over the years. So which also shows and which is also an upward trend. Also, number of teachers have been increasing over the years, but you find that we still have 75 female teachers per 100 male teachers. So the sex ratio in terms of our teachers is also skewed in favor of male teachers. Now, with these observations, you would have understood. That privatization, one, is going to be a problem, and then gross enrollment ratio as well. Gross enrollment ratio basically is the number of students who enroll out of the total eligible students. So if there are 100 eligible students who have passed their 12th standard, the number of students who are enrolling in higher education basically denotes the gross enrollment ratio. So issues being privatization, then we have regional differences, and also gross enrollment ratio. So these are three issues highlighted from here. Yes, we'll come to the reasons for gross enrollment ratio, and ultimately you would have to suggest what are the problems. Then if you look at, if you talk about regional differences, you find that the states with considerably higher number of population, and you can look at this graph. There are states with considerably high population of students who are in this age bracket of 18 to 23. You find they do not have institutions there, and ultimately these are the students who would have to migrate from these areas. So one idea is that we should have the number of colleges should be proportional to the population of students, the population of eligible students in that area, so that they do not have to migrate, so that their regional and local interests are also being taken care of. The way we were saying, if we promote students from the same region, they'll ultimately serve their own region, thereby removing the regional disparity. And we'll come to what kind of solutions we can make. If you talk about privatization, you have basic issues like affordability. Because of their orientation towards profit, the fee structure is much on the high side. The fee that you have to pay in these private colleges is high, and with this high fee, you find that your socioeconomically disadvantaged students get discriminated against because they would not be able to afford that kind of fee. And also, this discrimination is also on the basis of the region you are coming from, whether you're coming from rural areas or you're coming from urban areas. Then if we talk about private colleges, and you'll find that in government colleges, at least the basic eligibility criteria is met. The teacher will have your national eligibility test cleared, and more often than not, you'll find that they have their PhD as well, or at least they're enrolled in PhD. But in private colleges, they do not strictly follow this norm. They do not strictly follow the norm of national eligibility test. Now, so here we see that this is also a problem with respect to human resource, that we do not have uniformity when it comes to recruiting our teachers in private and public colleges, which has to be dealt with, because if someone's not eligible, the chances are they would not be able to maintain the quality. Yes, so if the institution and the student ratio changes, you find that it will ultimately give us better results. People would not have to leave the place. And also, another curious case is that the gross enrollment ratio is around 27%. Also, if you look at the proportion of the eligible students and the number of seats, that is also around 27-28%. So you'll find that not many seats will be left vacant. Those seats will be filled according to the eligibility. So this can also be another reason. That we do not have seats available because the number of institutions are less, and that's why your gross enrollment ratio gets impacted adversely. So these were a few issues highlighted in your All India Survey on Higher Education report. Now what we'll do is we'll look at the issues highlighted by your national education policy. Now you would say that why are we compartmentalizing? Because the thing is, when you look at the question, they'll talk about specific solutions. And at times they can ask a direct question on national education policy. So one question has already been asked in the previous year. But again, they can ask a question that what are the issues highlighted by your national education policy? Or what are the solutions? What are the suggestions? What is the roadmap of your national education policy? So yes, you have to understand these issues overall. But we are compartmentalizing to give due focus, due attention to your national education policy. And also, you'll find the repetition of these. But if you see that our national education policy would not try to address this problem with respect to privatization. In fact, they'll talk about privatizing colleges in phases. So that's something we'll look into. So these are a few issues highlighted by your national education policy. So one is that the higher education ecosystem is highly fragmented. This fragmentation can be understood in the terms that you have various colleges who have single course, standalone colleges who have single 1 or 2 courses, and we do not have multidisciplinary colleges in universities. So fragmented in that sense. And also this fragmentation can be looked into in terms of rural-urban divide. So what can be the suggestion? You can already start thinking about it. Less emphasis on development of cognitive skills and poor learning outcomes. This has been the problem there in the school education and here as well. And this is very obvious. The reason is, if you do not develop those learning abilities, cognitive skills, critical analysis during your school days, you cannot follow it or you cannot push it in your college during your college education or higher education as well. So the base is the school education. If the base is not right, if there is problem with the base, it will reflect on the structure that you create over it. And this is the reason, again, I always highlight that we do not even read our NCRTs properly till 12th standard. And it can be because of the teachers as well, that the way that they teach is not right, but the basic learning capacity is very poor in our students. And similarly, if you talk about learning outcome, and learning outcome in higher education can also be understood in terms of employability. There we had a different idea of learning outcomes, but here you can also relate it to. One is, yes, what happens with higher education, but also you can relate it directly to employability. that whether the skills that have been provided or the education that has been provided can actually convert into something practical. And there also you can already think of the solution. The way we were talking about vocational education in your school days, you can think of practical-based, application-based learning and vocational education in your college as well. Now, rigid separation of subjects and the streaming of students in narrow areas. Now, what happens is once you choose a particular subject, you have to stay with it. So, if it is engineering, you'll have to proceed with engineering. All the engineering subjects will come. But more often than not, we realize that the problem there is, yes, we give them exposure of engineering, which is also not practical, not application-based. The burden of the curriculum is high because you have the sectional tests, then you have your semester tests, you have to submit practicals without any push on application, without skilling the students in applying those theoretical concepts, applying that theoretical knowledge to actually have something on the ground, to know how to apply it, how to create something practically. And that is another reason that the levels of innovation and research are very low in our country. Then also you see that it is not just engineering that is going to help. Think of an engineer who is planning to go for a startup. Now, don't you think that they need basic understanding of how business is to be conducted? Then think of the poor communication and interpersonal skills in our college students, because interpersonal skills come first. Because wherever you go, the first thing is that you have to face an interview, and if you do not have the right interpersonal skills, do not perform well in the interview. Then also think about, what is business idea? Also think about the basic, say, fusion of various streams. So if you put a mechanical and an electronic engineer together, you can create something new. And the silos in which we study and the silos in which we work does not allow that fluidity, which again needs to be addressed. And I hope you are able to understand what kind of suggestions we have to come up with. Now, another problem is with respect to language. You see that particularly your technical education and your professional education is there in English. You have very limited scope of finding it in your regional language. And technical education particularly is not at all there in regional language. It is only English. Now think about the disadvantages of a student coming from rural areas. Think about the disadvantages of a student coming from a very poor socioeconomic background. Because the chances are that they would not be well versed in English. They would not be very comfortable with that language. So till standard, you have studied in one language, and then all of a sudden in your college, the medium of instruction changes, which will also lead to poor learning outcomes. So they'll try to address this problem of language as well. Then again, you have very limited teacher and institutional autonomy. Now, one thing is understand this autonomy from the curriculum point of view. Now, the curriculum is decided by the university, and you have to follow the same. And not just curriculum, but various aspects of it. How you have to proceed, what has to be covered, in what manner has to be covered. Everything is being dictated. Everything is being imposed on the teachers and the colleges. They do not have a scope of making changes according to their demand. Now, think about this. There are areas in the country which are resource rich, and you'll find a lot of mining, etc. industries there. Then also there are areas which have more spread of service sectors. Areas where you have manufacturing units of, say, cars, automobiles located. So we have regional disparity with respect to that. Now, if you want to employ a student in the same region, why not calibrate your curriculum according to the demands of the industry of that region? Now, we are not saying that you do not provide them other options, but majority of the students would want to stay and serve in the region. So calibrate that demand, the regional demand, to the industry. And again, already we know that there's a huge gap with respect to what the industry demands and what we are able to provide. And that is the reason we were talking about your vocational education there. So limited autonomy in terms of curriculum and the flexibility with respect to curriculum. Now, this autonomy also, when you talk about institutional autonomy, it also is financial autonomy. And this is where you'll find that the national education policy gives an indication that if you want to make an institution autonomous, you have to make it both administratively, academically, and financially autonomous. So if you try to make that financially autonomous, what does that indicate? That you are giving a push to privatization. So rather than addressing the issues related to privatization, you can see that there is an indirect push or indirect indication towards going for privatization. Now again, we do not have facilities available for career management and faculty advancement. You think of it both in terms of students and teachers. Now think of a student who has been studying well. Yes, the college is good. There will be placement drives that are going to happen in the future. And also you find the disparity that it is only a few institutions where these placement drives happen. And there are many institutions where you do not have any kind of placement support provided by the college. So think of the student. Now, apart from the theoretical knowledge, apart from whatever basic skills they would have learned during their duration of study, they will need interpersonal skills. They'll need professional skills. For example, for any industry right now, your advanced Excel becomes important. If not advanced Excel, but the basic Office, Excel, etc. become important. So these basic skills are also not being imparted. Students, you find that if you go to a company, if you look at the trainees, a lot of them are not even able to deal with basics of Google Sheets, for that matter, or Excel sheets, and which is something that has to be used. Even if you are in sales, you would have to maintain and manage a Google Sheet. Even if you are in education, you would have to use Google Sheets for some or the other reason. And as students, you might be using that as well to indicate what portion of the syllabus has been covered. So those lack of basic skills, and also a basic career counseling, because yes, a few of you might be there from good colleges, good universities, where they have career counseling wings, wherein your teachers and your experts will help you with deciding and choosing the career. What will be the right direction for you? But most of our colleges and universities do not provide any kind of those services. And similarly, if you talk about teachers, now teachers also have to be upskilled over the years. They cannot just remain with the static knowledge, because if there's a teacher, just think about this. If you're saying that there's a teacher who has to calibrate students according to the demand of the industry, but think about the teacher who's not involved at all in industry now. So to give them a basic glimpse of what is happening in the industry, how it is advancing, etc., you need to help them with their professional advancement. And also there has to be a push, there has to be an incentive, motivation for them to learn new things. Because generally you find that once they're selected, once they start teaching, everyone stops learning. The teacher themselves stop learning, which is a worrying sign. Because if they themselves do not know about the demands of the industry, how are they going to calibrate the students according to that? So if you remember, we were talking about professional advancement for teachers during school education. A similar thing has to be linked here. Now again, less emphasis on research in most of our universities and colleges. And if you remember that less than 1% of our budget goes on to research. we do not at all invest into research. And then there are other problems as well. So yes, be it health, be it education, we do not tend to go for research. And to address this, yes, you have solutions there. But think about this, that if people are not going for research, yes, Anshuman, it is with respect to the National Research Foundation that we're talking about now, that we will talk about now. It is one of the suggestions from your national education policy, and it is in the news for that matter. And again, you'll find problems, similar problems as we found in healthcare. In healthcare, what we said was that yes, one is we do not invest in sufficient amount in research. Then we are also talking about the outcomes of that investment, that not many papers are published, not many research papers are published every year. Then also we were talking about the issue with respect to these funds. So these funds not being dispersed in time, these funds remaining unutilized, etc. And if you look at the number of seats in research, the number of seats for research scholars, what you generally find, any college would not have more than 2, 4, 5 seats for research scholars. They might have a student base of more than 5,000 students, but they would not have more than 5, 10 seats, which is problematic, because it reflects on whether we are actually ready to, or whether we are willing to invest in research or not. So yes, there is, again, to this problem, there is a solution there as well. Then again, lack of mutual research review by peers. Then also you find that any kind of research paper that you write has to be peer reviewed first, and then ultimately final review is done and it is published. Yes, there are journals who take care of this. So for example, there's a journal for political science which is completely peer review based. So one of the person has written it and others will review it, and ultimately it will get published. But we do not have the culture of research in our colleges and universities. Our universities and colleges are only worried about teaching. They are generally teaching universities and colleges. They do not have any orientation towards research. And another problem is, even though they are teaching universities, at least make students employable. So neither are they investing in research, neither are they pushing research, nor are they making students employable, which is a problem. So these are a few issues highlighted by your national education policy. Now we could have done one thing, that we would have looked the suggestions here itself. But what I've done is we have compartmentalized so that you have a convenience. You have convenience while going through it later, and you have everything in one place. Now let's look at what can be done. So problems being lower gross enrollment ratio, problem being research, problem being language, right? So all these kind of problems, the problem again is your teachers, quality of teachers, availability of teachers, etc. So all these problems will be addressed through these suggestions from NEP. And also it has been not more than 3 years since the national education policy came out. So we do not know a lot about implementation. Just a few things keep happening and you find them in news. Do keep an eye on that. For example, your Higher Education Commission was in news, internationalization was in news. So these kind of things should be kept in mind. But yes, it will take time, because ultimately, when we look at a policy, it is not just how well it is implemented, but we also have to focus towards the outcomes of that policy. That what is the outcome of that policy, and that we will understand when we approach policy making and how to highlight the problems in any policy in the last chapter. And again, I'll say that it would not be practically possible for you to remember everything from every program. Yes, you'll remember the basic factual details, that these are the provisions. But you cannot possibly have detailed notes with respect to their critical analysis, because within any policy there will be multiple programs. So say this is national education policy, you have various programs in it. Now to cover every program would not be practically possible to mention all the, say, analysis in your notes. So what you have to understand is you have to get used to the basic framework using which you can actually analyze or critically analyze any of the policy. And also a lot of your critical analysis comes from the logical approach towards those. And we will try to deal with that here, but ultimately the basic framework will be dealt in the last chapter. So try to be a little critical. Try to be a little critical of these suggestions so that it is a learning experience for you. Now if we talk about the poor gross enrollment ratio, the policy talks about increasing the gross enrollment ratio to 50% by 2035. That means at least 50% of our students coming out of our schooling system who are eligible to go for higher education should go for higher education. And why is it important? Because it will give you skill set. It will help you get a job. It will help you get work. And this also can be related directly to the idea of demographic dividend. And I hope you remember that. So if to increase this gross enrollment ratio, apart from other things that will keep coming across, the policy talks about giving these institutions as an option to run open distance learning and online programs. I find that we have only limited universities who provide distance learning and online programs. So giving a push to these distance learning and online programs will be helpful. Now think how can these open distance learning programs and online programs can increase gross enrollment ratio? How do you think they can? So one is the positive side of it. How can they, in your opinion, how can they help with increasing gross enrollment ratio? Helpful for working students, great. So it will help with access. Also, it will help students, say coming from remote areas, rural areas, with access. Then, if you look at the fee structure already, you'll find that online and distance learning education is affordable. It will also help in the sense that if there is a working professional, because generally we are seeing the students, particularly boys, for the sake of work, for the sake of financial responsibilities, have to drop out of the education system and they do not enroll in higher education. So it will be a wonderful option to engage those working professionals in our education system, help them skill themselves, help them upskill themselves, and get a better employment. Yes, so these regional boundaries will matter less and less. So that comes with access. Great. So yes, it will increase access. Your distance will not matter. You can be sitting in one state and you can take up distance learning course from any university of the country. Similar with the online program. Now, can someone highlight what can be the problems? Now, these are the benefits. What can be the problems with these online program? Yes, it will support, say, housewives. Great. So yes, the question is how effective it is. What about the quality, whether we'll be able to maintain or not? Then, in terms of digital education, the most important argument is digital divide. Yes, so what happens when you are not in physical, you are not available in the classroom physically? If you remember, to socialize you, to help you with your basic interpersonal skills, you need to have interaction with people. Now this will rule out interaction, which is a problem. Then yes, a digital divide. Also, just think about this. Fake degrees can be a problem otherwise as well. So fake degrees are not just limited to open distance learning and online programs. And you see that recently, a week ago or 2-3 days ago, again they have highlighted a few colleges. They have banned a few colleges, right? So yes, we can question the efficiency, the quality, the availability of digital infrastructure, the digital literacy that people have. Right, fine. Another thing is, some of you might have these open or distance learning degrees. What you find is, if you go to the industry, if you go for any job, any kind of work, and if you say that I have this distance learning degree, do you think you are treated at par with the student coming with a regular degree? And you'll find the answer is no. Similarly, leave employment. Even if you go to take admission in PhD, generally on the basis of a degree, whether it is regular or distance, you'll get less marks if you have distance learning degrees. Right. So the basic problem is with respect to parity between a regular and these degrees, whether they be treated at par. And it is not just about the treatment, whether they have the similar learning outcomes. Because what happens to your practical examinations? How do you perform those? Yes, the argument can be maybe they can have a visit to the college or to the university once in a month or 2 months. Yes, those things can be done. But think about the overall efficiency of the entire program. So yes, it can definitely lead to an increase in gross enrollment ratio, but it will not necessarily lead to an increase or betterment of the learning outcome. So what was this? And see, this is how you critically analyze something. So what you have to do is, whatever things that we are discussing, try to look at these from a critical eye. Yes, so degree will be there, but learning would not be there. Yes. Okay, moving on. So moving on to the next suggestion, that is restructuring these institutions. So what we said was the higher education ecosystem is highly fragmented. We have universities and colleges which cater to a particular discipline, and there's no fluidity. Also, we talked about the problems with respect to research, that we do not have a culture of research in our higher educational institutions. Now let's think about this. What if in the same university, in the same campus, one idea is that you have education available for multiple disciplines. So you have management, you have engineering, you have medical, etc. So you have multiple disciplines available to be taken up in the same campus. One idea is that. What will happen if you are staying in the same campus? The chances are that you'll get in touch with other people. So there is an enhanced learning, not just only in terms of students, but even your teachers. They'll also have interaction amongst each other, and they'll also have a better learning experience. One. Second thing is, in terms of curriculum, now this is with respect to universities, but let's think about curriculum as well. So if we introduce subjects like communication skills, subjects like business studies, etc., with our other education as well, so that everyone gets a glimpse of everything. Because if we say if we are teaching engineering, one thing that has to go hand in hand is your environmental studies, your studies on sustainable development. Similarly, one should have the basic idea of how the business ecosystem works, what are various legal aspects related to it, so that it is comprehensive. If they want to start something on their own, they will be able to. Then also, it enhances the overall understanding, because even with your employment, it is going to help. Because there are only very few jobs where you need specialized skills. Now, again, even in the industry, they want people to multitask, take up machine learning and data analysis together. For instance, apply artificial intelligence in other domains, etc. So yes, that can be done on the level of curriculum. Then also, let's have students from various disciplines in the same campus. Let's have various courses in the same campus. Let's create these multidisciplinary universities where students from all the disciplines are available. This is one dimension, which can pretty much provide a solution to the problem of narrow streams that we are fitted into. Then you think about developing a culture of research. So there can be a university where not just teaching, but due importance is given to research as well. So much so that you have given equal importance to research and teaching, that you have equal number of seats for teaching and research. Now what will happen? So they are talking about three kinds of institutions. One are research universities, where equal focus is given to research and teaching. Then there are teaching universities, where focus is primarily on teaching, but yes, it is not devoid of research. Then there will be degree granting colleges, which will focus primarily on undergraduate teaching. HE means higher educational institutions. Now, if you look at these research universities, for instance, think about what can be the benefit apart from promoting research. Yes, we'll have more number of research scholars coming from that university. What can be the other benefits? Can you suggest? What can be the other benefits of these research universities? Yes, so it will promote a culture of research, increase in number of patents, etc. filed. So yes, so the ones who have not understood, just think about research scholars and your undergraduates and other students in the same university, in the same campus. Now these research scholars will influence those students as well to take up research in the future. These students also have something to look up to, that yes, you can be innovative, yes, you can take up new things. So one, it will give a push to innovation. Another thing is it will create a culture of research, a culture of innovation in our universities, which is going to be a good thing. So it need not necessarily make it practical based. So to make it practical based, we have other options. Yes, so recent ISRO collaboration with various universities to launch their minor projects. And also, if these universities, one, are giving equal importance to research, on top of that, they are multidisciplinary. So think about various research scholars from multiple disciplines coming together and creating something innovative, creating something new, and which is the need of the hour. These large multidisciplinary universities mean you think about your Delhi University. You have various courses ranging from humanities, commerce, engineering, medical. You have everything together. But there the problem is the campus is not in one place. So you can think of any big private university which has multiple courses in one place. For example, Amity University. For example, LPU, CU, etc. You have various examples. What are these? Multidisciplinary. They have multiple disciplines available there. So yes, it will lead to a culture of innovation, and will also, not just that will have innovation right now, but it will also inculcate that spirit in the students coming that are going to come from future generations. So this is with respect to restructuring. Now also what will happen is, for this research, you have National Research Foundation, and this is in news. You can go through it and let's see, once it is implemented, once it is put to test, let's see what are the outcomes. So be a little say cautious when you read in the newspaper, so that you link it to your static syllabus. Then also they talk about incentivizing students for taking up research, etc. Then there is that problem of students. There is the problem of your socio-economically disadvantaged students, where you find that your when we talk about say gender, we think about women. We see that yes, women are there. They are getting enrolled in higher education in good numbers. But what we see is one thing, that they are not being converted into employees at a later stage. They're not they're not employable. It can be because of various reasons. It can be because of the mindset of the society, that it is generally the boy, it is generally the male who has the primary responsibility of taking up economic activity, and they give focus to that. Also, it can be with relation to gender inequality in terms of employment, that the companies are not ready to give them jobs for various reasons. But also you see that apart from women, we miss on our third gender, the transgenders. What about them? So these socio-economically disadvantaged groups can range from women, transgenders, your SC, SC, OBCs, and your economically disadvantaged sections as well. So they are talking about incentivizing these students, giving them scholarships, etc. So that the gap that we find when we are talking about your SCs and STs, we found that the enrollment is not in proportion to their population, and neither in proportion to their reservation that has been provided. Yes, so your disabled sections as well. So for these students, they're talking about incentivizing them to take up higher studies. Then in this regard, you'll find one aspect with relation to transgenders and women that has already been mentioned. That is your Gender Inclusion Fund, which will promote these genders so that they take up higher education and they are able to sustain higher education as well. Now, the national education policy talks about enhancing the role of technology in education. So, enhancing the role of technology, it can be thought of in terms of online education. It can be thought of in terms of digitizing all the records. It can also be providing your e-learning material. And you see, if you have had a chance to go through the curriculum of any of the distance learning university, you find that they give you option whether you want to take up the hard copies or you want to take up e-learning material. Take, for example, IGNOU. So it has already been there, but giving a push to e-learning, giving a push to digitizing everything, so that there's no paperwork involved. Everything is digital, because digital can directly translate into efficient and economic. So it helps ultimately to cut down the cost. So increasing the role of technology in education. Now, this can also be understood in terms of increasing innovation in technology. The significant role that technology can play in education, giving a push to that as well. Then to increase gross enrollment ratio, to increase the number of colleges, to decrease the disparity, regional disparity, they're talking about investing close to 6% of our GDP. Now, it has to be done in a phased manner. It cannot be done that you change the entire budgeting structure and you do it next year. But this is the objective, and let's see whether this objective is fulfilled or not. Now, apart from the multidisciplinary colleges and universities, they talk about multidisciplinary education. So one idea is having these universities and colleges where students from multiple disciplines study together and they have exposure of each other. Another thing is changing the curriculum, wherein you introduce various subjects from various disciplines. For example, if you are taking up, say, business administration, you should also get a glimpse of what is happening in your society. You should also include some kind of professional skilling courses. Similarly, there is this university in Bangalore called Christ University, where you find that they give students an option in second year or third year, I'm not sure. So they give students this option of taking up civil services education basics as their optional subject. So that if there is someone who is interested in taking up or pursuing this career of administration, they can be at least prepared. Basic foundation level preparation can be done in the college itself. Because generally we find now, yes, people are getting more and more aware, but the general trend is after they're done with graduation, students start studying for civil services. There are only a few who take up this civil services preparation during their college days, because one thing is that the college curriculum is vast and it keeps you engaged throughout those 3-4 years. So giving an option, giving a glimpse of administration, talking about the foundation subjects in your college itself. What is this multidisciplinary approach? So similarly, there has to be say exposure of various disciplines to students from each and every discipline. So engineering student gets to know about environment, gets to know about society, gets to know about business, gets to know about other engineering streams, so that there is no strict compartmentalization. A student should get multiple options to choose from. It should not be limited. There has to be flexibility in this curriculum as well. Now also they talk about dealing with this problem of dropout. Now we see that the dropout rates are very high in our higher education system as well. The way the dropout rates are very high in school education, similarly they are very high in our higher education as well. And what happens? You have taken admission after 12th standard. You have taken admission in, say, engineering course. Now, if you drop out of the engineering course because of any reason, because of, say, family emergency, because of financial problems, because of some other reason, you drop your studies, you drop your engineering course in third year. Now, what happens is the basic qualification that you will have is that of 12th standard. These 3 years that you have invested in that education are completely lost. So, to tackle with that problem, they're giving an option of multiple exits. That if you drop out after 1 year, for some reason, if you have to drop out after first year, you get a certificate. After 2 years, you get a diploma. And similarly, at the various stages that you drop, you have various options. So that if you drop out, at least you have some qualification. Whatever skills you have learned can be put to use. But think about the problem. Can someone highlight what can be the problem with this? Giving multiple exit options. Create a divide in job, increase dropout, lack of interest, taking education lightly. Okay, lack of specialization, etc. Yes, so it will encourage early exit. Because previously, when students knew that if you drop out of your education system, the basic qualification that you get is that of well standard, and still they were dropping out. But now think, now they know that if you drop out after 1 year or 2 years, you still get it. You will still get some qualification. You'll get some benefit out of it. So it can be a motivation. It can be an incentive to drop out of the education. Another thing is, what happens to your jobs? Because your jobs will need specific skills. If you haven't learned the skills in the same order, how do they employ you? Think of think of a computer science student or engineering student, basically any engineering student. Now they are taught about things in phases. It is only towards the end of their course that they are able to integrate everything. And if it all that happens in the university or college, they're able to integrate everything, all their learnings, and ultimately put it to say practical use. But now, if you do not have a complete understanding, where do you employ these people? Then think about the benefits. One benefit is giving students degree, etc. Now think about a student who was actually not interested in the course, who took up this course, this undergraduate program, but after 1 year, he or she realizes that no, I'm not able to cope up with this. So at least the year that you have invested, if you drop out from there, take admission in some other course, at least the year that you have invested, you get some benefit out of it. And it shows something good on your portfolio as well, that you have the knowledge of whatever limited knowledge of business with engineering, for instance. So this can be a plus point. And now to handle that, they are again using digital means. They are creating this academic bank of credit where you'll have all the academic credits available from because you might have gone to multiple higher education institutions. So all the credits will be available in one place. Yes, so Abhijit is suggesting that they have already been asked in the college to create these ABC IDs on DigiLocker app by the university. So it has not been happening to all the universities yet, but yes, they have started working on it. So yes, we can help students with multidisciplinary education. Then also giving them multiple exit options, but yes, there is a lopside to it as well. Then also they talk about creating these menus, multidisciplinary education and research universities that we have already discussed. Now we talk a few things about the regulatory structure. Now this is something I would want you to take up as homework, because they're talking about creating a Higher Education Commission of India, inside which there will be multiple bodies who will take up those specific functions. And what you have to simply do is that you read about Higher Education Commission of India. What is it? What is the proposal? And compare it to a University Grants Commission. That what are the differences? What are the similarities? Whether this is going to turn out well for us or not. So just go through it once and let me know if you're not able to, because this is fairly simple. But another idea is right now the proposal is that they're working on the bill for Higher Education Commission. It will definitely become important for, if not for this year, but at least for next year, which will happen either in the monsoon session or maybe in the winter session. So you have to keep an eye on this. And you see that once it is passed, you'll find that a lot of news articles, etc., will come up. But to try to compare it to your existing University Grants Commission, because again, there has been a recent proposal, or recently they have started merging your University Grant Commission and AICT, so that they can finally achieve or finally move in the direction of Higher Education Commission of India. Moving ahead, they talk about improving research. So we are talking about opening up multidisciplinary universities, and they right now the investment is not more than 0.7% of our GDP. They want to increase it in line with what other countries which have better universities, which have better levels of innovation are doing. And they also have mentioned about the National Research Foundation. Then you talk about internationalization. Now this can be carried out in two ways. What is internationalization? Promoting the local colleges, the good institutions, at least the better institutions that are there in India. For example, IITs, IIMs, promoting them, incentivizing them to open up their campuses abroad in other countries. One idea of internationalization. The other idea is offering or opening our education system to foreign universities, to universities that are there abroad, the good ones, top 200 universities, requesting them to open up their campuses in India. These are the two dimensions of internationalization. So one thing is that recently you would have found in news that your IIT Madras in Delhi, they are coming up with proposal to open up their institutions in outside in Ethiopia, etc. What can be the benefit of this? Now we say that opening up our institution in some other country, how would it benefit the students and the education system here? So let's take up the first dimension, opening up of Indian universities abroad. So yes, there will be sharing of knowledge. Then yes, students, see, one thing is now think of a college or a university which has campuses in multiple countries. Can there be cultural exchange programs? Can there be student exchange programs? Also, it will add to the face value, because even our institutions, for that matter, will learn a lot. They can also improve on expertise. They would also get to know what is happening around, what is happening across the globe. They'll also learn new methods of teaching. They'll learn new methods of innovation. So this can be the benefit. Yes, so it adds to the diaspora. So we were trying to limit it to the education. So yes, it will have other benefits like remittances, Indian diaspora abroad, because then that also is helpful in diplomacy. Now the other idea is allowing select top global universities to operate in India. What can be the benefit of it? So one idea is similar, that you will have those, you'll have a transfer or an exchange of knowledge between people, or between students and teachers from here and between students and teachers from abroad. Because if they are opening up these campuses, it is not just Indian students who will benefit, but there'll be students coming from various countries to study here. Another thing is, you find that you have to now, if you want to take up a good quality higher education, you have to go all the way either to the United States or the UK or Australia or Canada. And you know how expensive that venture is. So one is limited access, because not everyone can get admission there. And another dimension is affordability. So if those good, brilliant institutions are available in India, it enhances the access of students to quality education in India. And also, it makes it affordable, because the highest courses, apart from your tuition fee, the highest amount goes into staying there, your accommodation. So those issues can be addressed. But can there be problems related to this? Apart from the better exposure, apart from the better access and affordability that we get, can there be a problem with respect to this internationalization? Can those universities, once set up in India, can they create a problem for us? So yes, not some, but a lot of students go abroad to find employment opportunities there. So okay, what happens to the local universities and colleges? Can they lose their importance? Because if you get very high quality education and say they are not able to compete, they are not able to increase their standards, what happens in that case? So it can have an adverse impact on the Indian education ecosystem. Then again, if they are opening up the universities in the country, who decides the norms of the fee structure? Who decides what will be the basic eligibility for teachers? Who decides whether the teachers that are going to be employed here will be from India or from abroad? Because one argument is that they open up universities here, we will generate more employment. Students will have better access. The gross enrollment ratio will increase. The number of seats per student, the number of seats according in proportion to the number of students will increase. Yes, so there can be a concern with respect to regulation of these universities. And if you think another thing, I'll tell you on this happens on a social and psychological level. Now you see that every society has a different level of exposure. They have different value system, and they have a different level of advancement as well, the different level of modernization as well. Think of the culture that you find in those universities. Yes, the good part is it's about innovation. They are always focused on quality. They look into the practical aspects of education and promote practicality in education. Vocational education is compulsory. So yes, there are various good things. But another thing is, it need not necessarily be thought in negative or positive terms. But the other idea is that the value system that they have is different. A lot of their values can come as a shock to us Indians. So will we be able to absorb that shock, for that matter, the cultural shock that we might get? Because if you talk to your friends, if you talk to your family members who have moved abroad for higher education, and you ask them, they talk a lot about the culture, the different culture that they have there. So what kind of impact that will have here? So yes, a student who obtains a degree from foreign universities might not be treated at par with a student getting a degree from Indian university. Yes. So again, international universities are resourceful. They have huge resources, so which can negatively impact or destroy local universities and colleges. Yes, so recent government notification, I have mentioned it in the PPT. I'll show you once. Yes, so we'll come to the draft. So you see that yes, it can impact our vulnerable sections, even though we see that it might help enhance the access, but it might impact adversely as well. What if they are still not able to get admissions here? Because apart from your basic qualifying test, they can keep some other eligibility criteria. Now, apart from this, they're talking about increasing vocational education. If you remember, they were talking about starting vocational education from your secondary education, that is 9th standard onwards. After 8th standard, you start getting vocational education, and also they talk about extending it to higher education as well. Why? Because if we compare ourselves with other countries, we find that less than 5% of our workforce in this age group actually has any kind of vocational education. Less than 5%. So 95% of us do not get any kind of vocational education. Then also, if you remember, in terms of mentoring, we were talking about engaging your seniors, engaging your retired professors and teachers to mentor the students and the university college teachers. So they have a dedicated program for that as well. And on these lines, you find that recently this draft UGC campuses of foreign higher educational institutions regulations were in use that few of you are talking about. So which relates to this internationalization that our national education policy talks about. And you can think about this. What can be the benefits? Because right now these are draft rules. Let's wait for them to get finalized. But you are already getting critical analysis of the same in the newspapers, so that you must go through. And also you have all the say negatives and positives which can be discussed. So I hope you will go through these draft rules and try to analyze them. That what can be the problems, what can be the possible solutions for the same. Because regulation is something that will become a major issue. Apart from other things, regulation is going to be a major issue. Yes, so the basic values that they have there in the West, if we are opening up those universities here, it will definitely impact our local traditions. It will definitely impact our value system. So it is a very open society there in the West. Right now, yes, we say, for instance, because if there are youngsters, then there'll be love relationships. There'll be live-in relationships. Now, yes, we do have it here in India, but it is not accepted to that extent. But there, it is a normal culture. Then also the relationship between the teacher and the student, it is different. They are very professional about this relationship. So yes, with respect to our morality, etc., it can be a problem. Yes, so it can westernize our society and the youth, that too completely. Yes, so you can think about these draft rules, and let's see what comes next. Now, let's think about this previous year question, the answer to which is that we have already discussed, but look at the kind of question that they have asked in the past. The quality of higher education in India requires major improvements to make it internationally competitive. So we have to improve the quality of higher education to make it internationally competitive. So you should know the basic idea of comparison. What terms can you compare? Basically your outcomes and various inputs. So that push towards research. Vocational education, better learning outcomes can be the aspects where you can differentiate or have differences between them. And they ask, do you think that the entry of foreign educational institutions would help improve the quality of technical and higher education in the country? Discuss. So the basic one dimension that is mentioned here, internationalization. Specific question on this dimension. Similarly, you can expect a question on any of the dimensions, and that's why we are trying to keep it in these compartments. So they can definitely ask a question on your higher education commission. They can definitely ask a question on the critical analysis of these multidisciplinary courses and universities. Yes, so to implement all these suggestions, shouldn't there be infrastructure development for effective and efficient results? And yes, in that direction, you find they talk about increasing the expenditure in public education in government, increasing the government expenditure in education to 6.5%, 6% of the GDP. So yes, they are trying to invest in the same, and also they want to give a push to the private players as well. So you can, I think now you can easily conceptualize this question. So let's discuss the structure of it. I think the points of the body, one, it is mentioned here. Second, we have already discussed, but let's look at the structure of the answer. So we have to, yes, tell them that whether the entry of these foreign educational institutions will improve the quality or not. So what we have to do is, you dedicate 2 paragraphs, one to the aspect, one to the positive aspect, which says that yes, it will improve. Because think about this. If the government has proposed this thing in the policy, that means they have strong feelings about this. They have done a thorough research about this. Because when we discuss about policy, you'll find that they look into various policy alternatives. They look into the projections for the learning outcomes. So thorough research has been done. That means more, they are expecting to benefit more compared to the problems related to this. So they're expecting to benefit more. So what you have to do is, you have to give more weightage to the positive aspect. And then yes, in conclusion, highlight briefly what can be the problems. So major part of your answer goes to saying that the entry of these higher educational institutions would help improve the quality. So this is the main body part done. In conclusion, you can briefly say that it can lead to problems in regulation. It can also become a challenge to the regional local universities that are there in India, etc. So that can be mentioned briefly in conclusion. Now think about an introduction. What can be a better introduction? Key suggest. What can be a better introduction according to you? So body, positive, conclusion, you can write basic apprehensions. And while writing this, you mention the how as well. So let's see what all introductions do you suggest. Mrityunjay is suggesting let's compare these universities. Then another idea is start with the fact about the quality of higher education in India. Okay. Then great. Sri Sharita has suggested that why not start with the draft rules in the introduction. Starting with the quote would not be a very good option for that matter. So no, rather than okay. Let's look at this. So some are talking about writing the positive and negative aspects. That is going to be the part of your body and conclusion. Another few are talking about mentioning the importance of higher education institutions. That is also not the demand of the question. Now look at the first statement. It talks about quality of higher education in India requires major improvements to make it internationally competitive. So one idea is compare and say how can we make it internationally competitive? Because this is not the only way. Opening up of foreign educational institutions is not the only way to make our education internationally competitive. One. So you can mention other factors. I hope that is okay. So that is basically a comparison between the higher education institution from abroad and the Indian institutions. Then another good suggestion was let's talk about the basic stats related to the quality of higher education. Let's talk about the poor learning outcomes. Let's talk about the gross enrollment ratio. So that can also be done. Yes, it is also a good suggestion. And then another option is to start with the draft rules that are there in use. Now another thing here, the point is that those draft rules were not there in use when the question was asked. They're not started. But now to get this question, yes, you can definitely start with draft rules, wherein they'll know that yes, the person is going to current affairs and they know the basics of it. And the mentioning of these draft rules will basically give the entire content context. It will contextualize your content. So yes, you can compare on the basis of gross enrollment ratio, etc. While facts related to quality have been mentioned, the report that we saw, your All India Survey on Higher Education, you can use pointers from there. So yes, the discussion with respect to positive and negative dimensions will be done in body and conclusion respectively, that you know. Then in the introduction, you can choose any of the way. Now you see that if you see this is the power of peer group, right? So the more you discuss amongst yourselves, the more you learn. The more you engage, the more you learn. Because otherwise, even if I would have suggested, I would not have suggested more than 2 introductions. And now you see you have more than 3, 4. The ways in which you can proceed. So these others can also try to engage because you do not know what brilliant ideas that you have, which can be used. So okay, so the basic structure can be this way. The pointers have already been discussed and are mentioned here as well. And do keep an eye on these draft rules. Now another idea is the impact of globalization on education in India. It's been days since we had discussed globalization. Now this globalization, why have we mentioned here is that with internationalization, with digitization or increasing role of technology, you find that globalization is also getting a push. And here basically I wanted to discuss what can be the impacts of globalization on education. Previously we have looked at the impact of globalization on our society, on our culture. Now what can be the impacts of globalization on the education system? Even on healthcare, I think we have already seen in terms of the elderly, as far as I remember. So what can be the impacts of globalization on the education system? Can you think about it? Because you can take a few pointers from your internationalization, you can take a few pointers from your digitization. So the first thing that you do is, if at all a question is asked, because this is a fairly simple question, they would not ask a question as simple as this. So what you do is, first break them down in various dimensions. So what can be the various dimensions of education? One can be access, another can be affordability, and then it can be quality. Now quality will contain the content of education. Just because there can be changes with respect to teaching methodology, there can be changes with respect to curriculum, etc. Now think in these terms. So increased access, right? Think in terms of these structures. There can be increased access with globalization. With globalization, education can become affordable by setting up international universities here, going for online or digital mode of learning. Think about use example of online learning programs by Harvard and other universities. So you can access those courses sitting at home here. Second is affordability. That now these courses are now you have access to these courses. Another thing is now these have become affordable. These are available at a cheaper price. Now the most important part, that is quality. If you talk about quality of education, you can think in terms of our teaching standards and methodology. You can talk in terms of our content of our education, right? So here as well you see that because because of say exposure to various ways of teaching, various methods of teaching, new content of teaching, we learn and we improve. Second, because of the global competition, we try to improve ourselves. So even the regional universities, local universities, Indian universities, we try to improve on the quality aspect. Then you talk about the content. The content will also change because we will definitely adopt a few things from there, and they will also adopt a few things from us. Yes, so it can not always contribute to teacher-pupil ratio. It can be only in specific cases, but at least the most number of students will have access to education. Yes, so better innovation, better thinking, better market experience, etc. So these are the few dimensions about globalization that you can think. Now, similarly, you can talk about the negatives. These are positives. You talk about the negatives. Now, they need not necessarily be affordable. You can think in terms of digital divide. You can think in terms of unequal access to socially disadvantaged groups. Then you can also think in terms of changing the content of our education, because there is a possibility that globalization can completely westernize our education. We already have issues with relation to language. That people are not able to learn in their regional language. People have to stick to this language called English in technical education. So which will affect that as well. So I hope you are able to understand. The only idea was to tell you how to break down education in its various dimensions, because generally we go for social, political, economic, etc., technological. But when it comes to these, like healthcare, it was always access, affordability, and quality. Even in education, it will remain the same. So whenever it comes to any kind of service, you have to break them down in a different way. So yes, these can be beyond the reach of poor students. It can erode our traditional values and ethos. English may dominate fully. Great. So yes, these can be a few pointers that you can mention. Then digitization of education has already been discussed previously. So what you have to do is, what can digitization bring to education? Again, what you have to do is access, affordability, quality. Then you look into the positives and also critically analyze and look into the negatives as well. So yes, so GER, if you look at GER, one is GER is an indication of the learning outcomes from your school education. Then yes, GER is a direct reflection upon the various socio-economic status of people in the society. It can be thought of in terms of quality of our higher education system, because our higher education system as a system, it is not just about the quality or the content of the education, but the higher education system. So it is not able to accommodate students. We do not have adequate number of students who are enrolling in our courses in higher education. So it has to do with that quality of education system. So rather than you think that it has to do with quality of education, it has to do with the quality of education system. So I hope you can take up this issue with respect to digitization of education. What you have to do is, again, access, affordability, and quality. We have already discussed this. So what you have to do is just think about how can it contribute to access, how can it contribute to affordability, how can it improve the quality, and what can be the problems with respect to these dimensions. So please give a quick thumbs up if you can deal with this question. One, it has already been discussed, and it is again a fairly simple question. Great. Okay. So I expect you to, when you say that yes you can, I expect you to at least create these structured notes in your while revising. Right. So this was with relation to your higher education system. What we did was we looked at the basic status of education in the country. Then we looked into a few problems that are national education policy highlighted, and we looked into various suggestions by the national education policy. While looking at those suggestions, we critically analyzed those suggestions, and we have seen that direct questions have been asked on specific dimensions of your national education policy. Now it happens only if they are in news, because they cannot expect everyone to go through the entire policy for that matter. So, but whatever is there in the news, whatever is being discussed, debated in the news, becomes important from your examination point of view, and that was the reason of keeping it segregated, so that there is no hodgepodge and you have everything fine. Now, what we did was when talking about education, we discussed the issues related to the human resources there. Similarly, when talking about healthcare, we discussed the problems and the suggestions for human resources there itself. What about other sectors? Because these are examples of just two sectors. What about other sectors? What about the human resources that are there? Right. So in that context, we will talk about skill development. And when we talk about skill development, we have already seen sector specific, education and healthcare. Now, when we talk about skill development, do remember that you have to consider all the kinds. You have to consider the unorganized workers from our organized sectors, and also remember, do not forget about entrepreneurs. The business aspect of it, the skilling that you need for that. When you're asking about national education policy and national health policy, rather than going through the entire policy document, it's better you go through the news articles or PRS. You go through PRS because they come up with the critical analysis as well. So you'll find pretty much everything in one place. And also, if someone has time, someone has energy, if you like reading, then you can definitely go through the document directly. But yes, the return on investment is not going to be very high. So if there is someone who has to write the examination, say 25 or later, you can definitely go through the entire document, because it will be a good reading experience. Everything is connected. Also, you get to understand how do they formulate these policies, because not everywhere, but at times the intent will become clear. At times the intent will become clear, and which is a good thing. But if you're writing next year or this year, just stick to your analysis provided by various newspapers, and you can go to PRS website, do it from there. That will be more than sufficient. Then when you look at skill development, you look at organized, unorganized, and entrepreneurs. The first thing is, just now we saw that in our national education policy, that the level of skilling in our population is very low. And this is actually coming from a skill development report. And another thing is that your national education policy borrowed this fact from here, for that matter. That you need not remember, but yes. But if we look at the countries to which we compare ourselves, you find the rates of skilling trainings are very high, as high as 96% in South Korea. And with respect to skilling, why is skilling important? The first idea is, why is skilling important? Let us see, with the increasing population and close to 60% of our population in the working age, if this population in the working age is not skilled, how do we reap the demographic dividend? So it ultimately comes down to supporting the population growth with economic advancement, tackling poverty, etc., with the skill development. Because ultimately, all the people that are there, if not all, but majority of the people at least, should be skilled enough to get a job, to get an opportunity to work. Because it is not just about the individual. It is not just about poverty on the individual level. Because you see, with your job, with your work, you're going to contribute to the national income. You're going to contribute to the economic development of the country as a whole. So this is something that has to be understood, that is very significant, and the government understands the same. And similarly, you find that they have skill development policy. So yes, it will help in converting our youth bulge to demographic dividend. And I think this question was there in the weekly test, and I hope at least 50% of you would have written the weekly test. Okay, so what we'll do is, these are again coming directly from the policy. So we will look at the problems and try to suggest what can be the possible suggestions for the same with respect to skill development. Again, you remember, you keep this in mind. It is not just your unorganized sector, because when we talk about scaling, that is the general direction that we go in. But it is about your organized sector as well. And again, your businessmen, the ones who want to take up business or entrepreneurial activities. Now, one thing is, you remember that one suggestion is, or one government intervention is, that government is talking about introducing vocational education starting from secondary education. So you remember this because this policy framework is old and the national education policy is new. So this challenge of skill development has been taken up by the national education policy. So now we see that generally, traditionally, we find that any work that is being done with hands, like any kind of manual labor, it is generally thought, they are generally looked down upon. Because you think about this, every society has a way of stratifying. And we find that it is on the basis of work, it is on the basis of involvement of one's hands that we stratify. So if someone is into business or is into, say, any kind of service sector jobs, they are considered above. Then if you look at industrial laborers, etc., the ones who work in blue collar jobs, they are considered here. And then you'll have people working in the unorganized sector who have to put in a lot of efforts and who have to basically do work with hands. Think about your about the people who work in homes for cleaning, etc. And then you see that this is how we stratify. And also, you would see it is not just the society which stratifies, but that stratification is enters into us through socialization. That we also treat people and think of people in varied degrees on the basis of their work. Just think about the way you talk to, say your housemate, and the way you talk to someone from your office, a colleague, if not a colleague, or maybe from some other department, someone you do not know. So we always create a mental image of someone. If someone's poorly dressed, if someone doesn't look very sharp, we have a different image. There is someone says wearing torn clothes. If someone is speaking in the regional language, we create a different image. And basis that is stratified. And we find that traditionally, it is directly related to your to the degree to which one works with their hands. So the ones who work with their hands are generally considered lower. And again, we find that when we talk about vocational education being provided, now that vocational education might include a lot of things. It might include things wherein you would have to work with your hands, and your parents might protest that why would my daughter or my son, who's going to the school, who's going to this fancy school, good school, being taught all this, do you expect them to take up these activities in the future? But another idea is, and let's see what becomes a part of the vocational education program. But the other idea is, you get a glimpse of how things work. It makes you skilled, because it is not just specific skills related to that particular work. It will reflect on your overall personality. That you'll be more careful with things. Think about someone learning how to create a pot, learning pottery. Now the level of focus, the level of say seriousness that they'll have while creating that pot, don't you think it'll reflect on other dimensions as well? Don't you think they'll be that careful when studying? They'll be that careful while speaking to someone. So it is not necessarily just the skill set related to that, but its impact on your overall personality. Again, now if you see that generally our industrial units, particularly small scale units, they treat skilled and unskilled professionals at par, skilled and unskilled labor at par. For instance, you find that in these industrial companies, you'll find engineers and people who do not have any degree working together on the same project. Now, yes, it is quite a democratic and mixing experience. That is fine. But why are we not putting the skills of that engineer to use? That engineer could have contributed in a better way, but because of lack of inadequate employment opportunities in the market, people do not have an option but to agree that yes, we will take this up. And even the company doesn't think that we can actually put them to use in a better way. They can help us rather than doing this manual work. They can help us with our problem. They can become better engineers. They can help us in servicing our machines, etc. So particularly this small and medium industries, these consider them at par. They do not treat them differentially. They treat everyone equally, which is a problem. Now, another thing that you see is that we have various skill development programs going over the years. And again, you find that every department have their skill development programs. If not every, but most of the departments have their skill development programs under various ministries. But they do not have any kind of convergence. They do not have any kind of coordination. On top of that, you find that you have various state governments who have skilling programs, and they run the same skilling program as the central government is. So you'll find overlap for that matter, which has to be removed. There has to be collaboration amongst them, because it is not just one specific skill that can help one to ensure a job, to get them a job. It can be related to giving them multiple exposure, because one idea is that our skill development programs are not calibrated to requirements of the industry. They keep the person in the same zone. If a person has come unskilled, the kind of work or the kind of skill that is imparted, that will also keep them at pretty much the same level, because they'll be working manually with that. So these skill development programs have a gap when we talk about industry. That point is mentioned ahead, but let's discuss it right now. So the industry demands X, we are providing them Y. The way we are doing with our education, the similar way we are taking our skill development programs as well. So what has to be done? They have to be calibrated to the demand of the industry. Now think about innovative solutions. What have we done is, we have introduced vocational education in schooling, and through your college, we are developing a culture of innovation, etc. We are imparting practical skills and professional skills to the students in colleges, right? Apart from that, what can be done to bridge that industry gap? Think about your various experts from industries giving occasional visits to your schools and colleges. If you have on your say counseling team, on your career management and counseling team, if you have industrial experts who come in, share their views, share their experience, give a few pointers with respect to what direction you have to move in, even though yes, they cannot say be there and skill you, but at least they can give you the general sense of direction, and not just you, but your trainers as well. So bridging that gap between the industry and skill development programs. Now, another challenge is 93% of our workforce is engaged in unorganized sector. Unorganized sector relies heavily on unskilled labor, and also the level of skilling is not great. So we have to address this, because generally the skill development programs that we have. So, and again, do you remember one more thing, that when we talk about skill development programs, it is not just the government which has to take it up. It has to be from the private players as well, because skilling can happen on various levels. Start skilling them through education, school education, higher education. Then you skill them to take up a job. Then you skill them, train them doing the job, and then there is upskilling throughout their career. Right? It can happen on various levels, and every organization will have a role. So your skilling that is done before you take up a job and after you take up the job is generally taken up by your organization. Similarly, if you see that the kind of skill development programs that we have for people, the government generally focuses on various skills, various manual skills, which are say, take example of carpentry. Yes, it can help, but only to a limited extent. We also have to cater to other part of the population. We have to see that there are small business entrepreneurs. Just think of a person who is selling any kind of product in the marketplace. Say they are selling your various charts, etc., that aspirants put up on their walls. Along with those charts, they'll put up charts of say Shah Rukh, Kajol, etc. Maybe I'm a little outdated, but yes, you'll have those actors, actresses, etc. They'll have various things. Now, if you want to skill that person, why would you skill them in some other skill? Skill them in the business that they're taking up. Why can't it be related to the various entrepreneurship programs? That how is it that you can actually market your products better? How is it that you can make more sales, etc.? How you can make your supply chain rigid? And also, you find that unorganized sector is not as unskilled as we think. Think of an example. Think of a person who is selling. Think of a person who's selling, say your say multiple products over the year. So, for example, during now it's 15th August or your Independence Day is around. Now you find a lot of them selling these flags, national flags. Then around Diwali, they'll go on selling crackers and masks around Dashera. Then around New Year and Christmas, they'll sell those Santa hats. Then around Holi, they will go on selling colors, etc. So throughout the year, they will change not less than 5 to 7 products. They will not change less than 5 to 7 products. And they do it so efficiently that they have their supply chains in place. Now, one product is coming from one industry. They have the contacts, the links there. The supply chain is rigid. They get their products in time. They sell it, make profit. Then the other products, say colors, are coming from some other company, some other area for that matter. Because again, things are made, are area specific as well. Where are they manufactured? Where is the dealer, etc. So the supply chain remains the same. So they get those products in time. They start selling those. So they're changing a product more than 5 to 7 times in a year. Think of any kind of quote unquote these say better organizations, better in terms of their revenues, better in terms of their infrastructure availability, etc. Think of those. If they want to change a product with which the entire supply line, everything has to change. If they want to change their product, it would not take less than 5 years to change a product. And these people from unorganized sector change their products, change the entire supply chain, etc. more than 4 or 5 times in a year. And look at the skill. And again, the unorganized sector, for that matter, is very equitable. Now, whatever profit they make, whatever profit is made at various levels of the supply chain is very equitable. Because in industries, what you find is it is the industry owner who will make the maximum profit, who will extract the maximum profit. Whereas here you find that the entire supply chain, the profit gets divided through the entire supply chain. So the producer gets their share, the seller gets their share, the wholesale seller gets their share, the ones who are involved in the logistics get their share, and similarly, the ultimate retailer also gets the share. So it is not as say weak as we understand. Yes, they might not have business acumen, which can be paid with. Yes, government can help them skill in that, but it is not that they do not know how to run their business. Again, various states have various challenges. Similar idea when we're talking about education. If you're coming from an area where you the majority of the people are engaged in agriculture, say think about Haryana, Punjab, majority of the people are engaged in agriculture. So why not skill them in relation to agriculture? Why not make them aware about various new practices, methods, etc. Similarly, if someone is coming from some other region, they'll have again their specific requirements. But what happens is the policies, everything flows from the center, flows from the top, without giving any regard to the regional differences. And this is one problem with our policy making, that we put a blanket without realizing that there are going to be various regional disparities. Now, whatever free training programs are available, their efficiency, their effectiveness can be questioned, because those free kind of skills. And just think about it: if you take up, you might not be aware of say the skilling programs that are happening in the skilling centers, but you might be aware of the various free programs that are available online. Just think about those programs. Yes, you will get a fair idea about how things go, but they would not be able to impart their specific skill. They would not make you employable. They would not help you in getting a job. So these, yes, there should be availability of courses, etc. At least the foundational programs for any kind of skilling should be available for free, but there should be better quality programs available as well, because people are not aware. And you won't realize that I've seen even in the corporate industry. Just a second. So you show with the board. I think the locks broke. No, it's fine. Sorry. So you find even in the corporate industry, people wait for months altogether after taking up these free courses and expect to get a job, without realizing that while you're sitting in the interview, the kind of questions that they're asking, the kind of projects they are giving, you're not able to answer. You're not able to deal with them. And simple idea is that you have to upskill yourself. So this is also one of the limitation of our skilling programs. So one is the gap between the industry and the skills that you're providing, and also various issues related to mindset. Let's come to the next part. We have to also talk about the quality of our trainers, the one who are imparting these skills in people. How qualified or how skilled are they themselves? So we should have, the basic suggestion is we should have skilling programs for them, and not just skilling programs or not just training programs, but upskilling as well, because the industry is perpetually moving. It is very dynamic. Things are changing. Newer things are getting added. So keep upskilling your trainers as well, so that they are able to deliver. Because this gap is mostly the gap between industry and the kind of courses that we provide is, you find that the trainers that are there and the curriculum that is there, it is very old. And more often than not, those things have changed. Now, when the entire thing is moving towards artificial intelligence, etc., where is the need for learning how to work on a lathe machine? Because you do not find many opportunities there. Yes, we do know that there will be people who are not technically sound, there will be people who are not qualified, who need to learn that. But why do we have these, say, programs which avail everything equally, uniformly to everyone? Yes, so the skills have been devoid of industry employer linkages, and we have looked into the suggestions. And I hope you are able to absorb the suggestions that we are giving, because ultimately they can ask the question directly on suggestions. How can we say make our say youth or make our working age population more skilled, or make them suit the demands of the industry? Those kind of questions, specific questions can be asked. So I hope you have absorbed the idea of these suggestions, that what can be the various suggestions. So our education is also not linked to the industry skills in demand. And another thing is that the government has already suggested the solution for this, and you can choose it directly from your national education policy. Again, low women participation rate. If you talk about women participation, it is way low compared to the men, which has to be increased, which has to be made better. And not just this, also think of the gender stereotypes that are enforced. For example, if it comes to stitching, tailoring, etc., it is generally the women who are imparted the skill. Why do we do that? Let's keep it equally open for everyone. So one is increase women participation, and also try not to push women in these pink collar jobs. Let them have a free choice with respect to what course they want to take up. Then, if you talk about various entrepreneurship programs, yes, you do have those programs. One is the content is very outdated; they're not calibrated to the industry. Another problem is even though we have those programs, yes, people learn from those, but ultimately, where is the money? Where is the funding that can be taken up to invest in their business? So even though we have a very good startup ecosystem in our country, but still you find that the funding is very limited. And think about the ones who are working in the unorganized sector. If they want to scale up, where do they get the funding from? They do not have any means to get funding. And we'll take the break. It is just 2-3 suggestions that are left, and we'll take a break. So role of ICT in skilling, information and communication technology. So basically, all your soft skills, your courses with respect to language, can be taught online. They need not be live programs as well. They can be recorded lectures, which people can go through. Right. So it is not necessarily the role of the government. It can be taken up by private players as well. So I'll just keep mentioning that till you absorb that fact. So at least basic skills, technical skills, and say basic soft skills, or your interpersonal skills can be taught online. Then again, you have to be ready with the demand of the industry, because again, even though we impart technical skills, we do not teach them how to behave, how to communicate, because communication is the key. If you cannot communicate to your team how the work is to be done, then the work would not be done properly. Similarly, if you're not able to communicate your issues or problems, then it becomes a problem. So basic level of skilling is required, and you can use digital means for that matter. Now there has to be on-job training and upskilling. The way I was saying, that once you have entered the job, only a few companies, only a few Indian companies provide the training. Only the big established corporates, the MNCs, provide the skilling. Otherwise, it is just once you enter the job, once you start with the job, they want you working on those tasks right away, within a matter of a day or within a matter of 2 to 5 days. They want you up and working so that they can extract maximum benefit out of it. So on-job training has to be there, and also you have to keep upskilling your employees, because newer things are coming up. So keep upskilling, keep imparting those newer skills that are coming. And also just think about these things. Why do companies not go for this on-job training, particularly Indian companies? They think that it is waste of resources, and that is the reason they look for experienced people that who already have an experience in this, and we do not have to train them, because training will also take time, a month or two, and maybe longer. So they want people only coming out of say experienced background. But think about the newer people, the freshers. Where do they go? Those freshers need companies who will onboard them, who will keep them as interns, skill them, and prepare them for the industry, because ultimately if you skill them, they are going to benefit you, and you need not pay them the exact salary for those training months. If someone is a fresher, they'll have that flexibility to work. Also, companies have an apprehension that once we impart this training, they get trained here and they'll go work elsewhere. And this happens, that once the training is done, a lot of employees leave and go look for better opportunities. And once they find a better opportunities, they leave for those. Because generally, this on-job training is being provided by your corporates. They are not that high paying compared to the newer companies. So they learn here and they'll leave for better companies. For that, there can be a simple solution. Why can't we have a bond that you cannot leave this company after you're trained? You cannot leave this company for another year, so that even the company gets the maximum benefit out of it. Yes, it might look like a restriction on mobility of the employee. It might look that why the employee is being crushed, but the simple idea is it is the company who has trained the individual, and there's nothing wrong in getting a bond signed. So maybe do not keep the amount very huge, but at least keep it, so that if they have to leave for some reason, because the reason cannot always be say switching a job, there can be other reasons as well. So at least it is it is something bearable. They can pay with ease. But yes, you can go for bonds. Similarly, you find various companies providing these upskilling courses, but rather than relying on someone from outside, why not the industry itself? Because generally we find that it is only about work. You go work for 9 to 10 hours and come back. That's all they expect from you, and maybe more. You can invest more number of hours. They do not think about the career advancement that a person can have. Because if you look at companies like say Deloitte, they provide various benefits. So they reimburse whatever your professional programs that you take up. If you want to go for upskilling yourself, they'll reimburse that amount, for instance. So the companies also have to look into the career advancement of the employee as well, rather than just thinking of it as their selfish motive and just doing it. Then also, counseling and guidance have emerged the biggest challenges. So counseling and guidance right from your school education through higher education and towards job. You can have industry experts, you can have retired professionals who can help them with guidance and counseling. So these were all the suggestions with respect to your skill development. Now again, remember, it is not an exhaustive list. This is all the suggestions and issues that are there in the policy, but you keep coming up with something new every now and then. So with respect to human resources, because human resources was another topic that was mentioned along with health and education. So human resources and health, human resources and education, human resources in general. So if you talk about issues related to human resources, the idea about skill development is what you need to understand. So now let's do one thing. Before we proceed ahead, let's take a break. Maybe if you get time, just look at the question during the break, and then we'll discuss it after the break. So let's meet at 8:25 after the break. Welcome back, everyone. So I hope you looked at this question. Let's see what this question talks about. Young people are a major human resource for development, key agents of social change, and the driving forces of economic development and technological innovation. In this context, discuss the challenges that India is facing utilizing its youth bulge. Now, it says that young people are brilliant, are amazing human resources, and lead and become key agents of social change and development of a country. And in India, we see that we have a lot of young population. We have this youth bulge. But what are the challenges that India is facing in utilizing this youth bulge? Now, simple question, but we have to see what all things have to be covered. Now, one part is that we have to look at the challenges that India is facing in utilizing this youth bulge. Now, one challenge can be with in relation to the human resources, that is this youth bulge, that we are not able to provide them education, skilling, and health. Then another problem can be with respect to the availability of jobs, etc. Because this youth bulge can be put to use, can lead to development only if they have avenues to develop themselves. If they get developed, then only they'll be able to develop the nation. So it is not. So my point is, it is not just the idea of human resources, and that too just of skilling that has to be mentioned here. Because if you look at this question, it primarily one would think that it has to do with skilling. It is not just skilling. You have to see that what are the challenges that India is facing in utilizing the youth bulge. If you want to utilize this youth bulge, one is that you have to work on these dimensions of the human resources of these youth, and then the other part is how about yes, the jobless growth, underdeveloped industrial sector. So it is about the opportunities, or it is about the circumstances that are there in the Indian system as well. So we have to cover both the dimensions. So here you can think in terms of the employment opportunities. I'll repeat this again. That in the context of in this context, and we'll come to the context. In this context, discuss the challenges that India is facing in utilizing the youth bulge. If you have to utilize this youth bulge, one is that you have to provide them education, skilling, take care of their basic needs like health, etc. Then the other part is we have to generate employment. We have to engage them somewhere. So we also have to look into the problems related to employment opportunities. So I hope this main part is clear, and this is something we have already addressed. So this main part can be taken care of, right? But do remember, whenever you approach this question, just think about it, because students tend to write this answer only in this dimension, only with respect to skilling, and maybe to a certain extent to education. But what about the other basic necessities of health? And what about, yes, you have skilled them, everything is fine, but what if nothing's available? If there are no opportunities for them, where do you expect them to go work? Now let's think in terms of this was the structure of the body part, and what we can do is how do we conclude? Conclusion can be easy here. Conclusion can be a couple of suggestions, something on the positive note to counter these challenges. So conclusion and body is done. Think about introduction. The introduction says that young people are a major human resource for development, etc. Key agents for social change, driving force of economic development. This. What can be the introduction? Now, one introduction I suggest is that briefly in 2 to 3 lines, you try to address the how of this. Try to address the how of the statement. The statement you have, how of the statement, that how will they contribute to development? How will they become the key agents of social change, etc., etc. So one way is how. Okay. Yeah. So one intro can be what is youth bulge. Now the reason is. Now, do not just go about this youth bulge. The reason is that it looks like a word which needs an explanation. So just a one-line explanation for this youth bulge. Great. Talk about how you can convert this to demographic dividend. Yes. So that is the how of it. How, but you have to do it in a very brief manner. We should talk about how to convert this into demographic dividend. Will take a long time. Yes. So Saloni has written this right. So she's saying that this youth bulge, if we provide them education, skilling, and health, they become what? They become human capital. If this human capital is provided with jobs, we ultimately reach our demographic dividend. Yes, so it is a good way to understand. So yes, one is we can write about what is this youth bulge. Now with this definition of youth bulge, a few of you are suggesting write about the population stats. So you can just briefly mention that we have a major proportion of our population is young. So you can use some stat, then you can just define youth bulge. What is this youth bulge? And then also within this as well, what you can do is you can actually talk about the how, but it will make your introduction long, and that way you would not be able to give your body part due weightage. So it's better you either go with the definition of youth bulge and a little stat, else you can go with the how. So these can be 2 ways you can introduce. No, it's better not to write the Malthusian theory. Also, I think these are 2 better ways in which we can introduce this question. Then we come to body part. In body part, you have to remember that it is not just the human resource, but it is also the circumstances. It is also the availability of jobs, etc. that should be dealt with. And in conclusion, you can simply give a suggestion and move ahead. So I hope this question is clear. This discussion is clear. Great. Now with this, we move on to our next chapter, which talks about development processes and industry. Now remember, when we were talking about development, we looked at Professor Amartya Sen's idea of development, and we also compared development to empowerment. That was done. Now we are also saying that there are a lot of people who have been left behind in this process of development. What are the problems related to our developmental strategies? Everything has been dealt with previously. Now what we have to see is, what we have to think about is that we generally put the entire responsibility of developing a nation on the government. We say that now we have paid our taxes, we have done our duty, we have done our part. Now it is you who has to do it, and we do not even care to hold them accountable when they don't. That is a different thing. But the idea is generally it is the state who is thought of as the key agent of development. But what about our responsibility as a society? What about our responsibility as a community? And we see that government has limitations. Government has limited reach with respect to development. They cannot reach every remote corner of the country. Then they do not always know what are the local needs and aspirations. So that definitely you find that we have a disconnect between the government and the people. That our voice, we complain that our voice doesn't reach the government, and the government complains that citizens are not participating. So there is this gap from both sides. Now think of the way our democracy functions. Now, our democracy being a representative democracy, wherein we elect our representatives who represent us in the parliament, and that is where all your policy making and everything takes place. All your decision making, policy making takes place there. That means we have elected our representatives, and they are doing it for us. Now, because of this, what happens is, and this is something very clear, and not just India, you can look into it anywhere. You see what happens is, over a period of time, these representatives become more important than the people whom they are representing. The idea being the politicians become more important compared to the general population whom they represent. And that's where you find that we need the role of civil society. We need a role of external of a factor apart from the government who can help bridge this gap, who can help help government correct its course if it is going wrong, who can help government in providing various services to people where the government cannot reach. So the basic idea is, rather than looking at development as solely the responsibility of the state, it has to be a responsibility of the society at large. Because it is not that we have paid our taxes and we are done. That this is all we have to do. Yes, they contribute to development. Yes, government will utilize those funds. But we see that with active civil society taking part in development, one is helping the government in development and also holding the government accountable that you are not doing this right. Please correct your course, etc. So in this regard, we will see what is civil society. And you have to remember that civil society is the larger framework within which you'll find your NGOs, SHGs, etc. So civil society, within that, you have all the components that we are going to discuss. Because the questions you would have seen are generally directly asked on NGOs, SHGs, cooperatives. Any questions are asked on the specific forms of civil society. This idea of civil society is something that will have the overarching structure, right? So it is the idea of civil society under which all these various dimensions come. Now let's start with this. So what you have to understand is what is civil society, what are the basic features of it, what can be the few examples of civil society, what can be the issues faced by civil society, and how we can solve them. Yes, so we are coming to it. We are coming to it. What all it will include. Now what you have to do is I'll tell you that these features that are there, that these features of the civil society, these are the basic features. And what you have to do is that if you want to know whether, so Deepika, it is for you, if you want to know whether a pressure group is a civil society or not, apply the rules, apply the logic. And we'll come to it, how to go about it. And you need not, because see, there are a lot of differences. Because, for example, one might say that media is civil society. Yes, it falls in the category of civil society because it will be involved in activism, it will be involved in running awareness campaigns, etc. But at the same time, if we go by the strict definition of civil society, it has to be not for profit. And you find that if you talk about your media houses, not the media as an institution, media as an institution can be considered civil society. But the irony is that the media houses that we have are for profit companies. So there is that conflict. So need not have a very clear picture of what is it, because everywhere you'll find exceptions. So what we'll do is we'll stick to our specific types after we're done with civil society. Okay, let's start with it, and everything will fall in place during the discussion. Now, in a civil society, people voluntarily come together. Voluntarily means they are coming of their own free will. They're not being forced to join. So people, all these people, voluntarily coming together, having an objective of welfare of the society. The objective is, why are they coming together? The objective is welfare of the society. Now, this welfare of the society can be in any direction. This welfare can be, say, taking care of the health and well-being of people. It can be helping people with education. So it can be anything, but it has to be related to welfare of the society. And also to raise the problems of people before the state. So what we said was there's a gap between the state and the citizenry, because over a period of time the state has been getting stronger and stronger. And not just state, even various components. Your politicians, etc., are also, your representatives are also becoming stronger, and they're going out of reach of the citizens. So to bridge this gap, so to make the voice of the people reach the government, and whatever information government wants to provide reach a citizen, to make sure that happens, we have the civil society to bridge that gap between the government and the citizens. Now take various examples and you'll be able to understand. So think about pressure groups. Let's take the idea of pressure group. You think about a pressure group. It is a voluntary association of people coming together. What are they trying to do? They are highlighting a cause, that this is the problem that is going on. The government is not ready to listen. Either the government does not know that this is happening, as the government does not want to do it. So those people come together who have a specific objective, and they start protesting and they start lobbying against the government that you have to make these changes, creating pressure on the government to do something, to act on something. What is it? Civil society. Similarly, think about your NGOs. What do NGOs do? Again, every organization is going to be voluntary. And if you look at the NGOs, you'll find that they want to work for welfare of, say deprived sections. They are working in the direction of, say, helping the government with policy making. Think of Pratham as an NGO. They come out with this ACER report, which ultimately helps government analyze and evaluate its policies. Similarly, they can help in the government in implementing various programs. You would have seen that whenever you have these programs coming up. For example, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. Now, these NGOs, these various self-help groups, and the civil society at large helps government in implementing those programs on the ground. So you are talking about student unions as well. And also one more dimension that you have to remember is, in our context, keep them non-political. Think of the pressure groups which do not have any kind of political affiliation, because that is what the civil society means from our perspective. Because yes, they are also form of civil society, again a voluntary group coming together, wanting to work for, because whatever their political ideology is, how do you support a political ideology? Say political ideology of the right or the political ideology of the left. The basic supporting arguments are, this is ultimately for the betterment of the society. So objective is also betterment of the society, because on those grounds they argue that this way of doing it, say the socialist way of doing it is going to be the right way. This is how we can develop people. This is how we can ultimately make people share the benefits of development. And similarly, the right wing would do the same. So the objective is ultimately welfare of the society. But when they have a political tone to it, you find that it becomes problematic, because then it is not open. Then it is say reflecting the aspirations of a certain section. It is not related to the society at large, society as a whole. So try to not include the ones who have a political overtone to it. I hope you get it. Yes, we'll come to it. Cooperatives are also civil societies, right? For example, we'll come to it. Yes, so these societies who have primary goal of the specific objective is public service are to be understood as civil societies. So I've already told you that there can be various variations, exceptions with respect to this. What we have to do is we have to stick to our agenda for that matter. Okay, getting back to the part. So these are voluntary in nature, that they do not have any kind of compulsion of coming together. So 10 people coming and forming a group, they do not have any compulsion at all. It is out of their own free will. It is out of their choice that are there in that group. Then these are people with similar interests. So that similar interest is basically public service. And again, when we say public service, public can be served in various ways. Public can be served by providing food to the downtrodden, to the poor. Public can be served by providing better employment opportunities, skilling people, providing them education, etc. So the ultimate objective is public service, but it can be achieved in various ways. So, for example, the ultimate objective of our education policy is better learning outcomes. This is the ultimate objective that we have to achieve, that we should have the better learning outcomes. Now, these better learning outcomes are achieved in various ways: by increasing the expenditure, by increasing the public expenditure, by restructuring our curriculum, etc. So these are various ways in which it can be reached. So please do not confuse, because then you'll have your cooperatives and your self-help groups, which will look like it is limited to a certain section. It is for personal gain, right? So, and we will try to differentiate that. But do remember that the objective is public service, but that public service can be done in various ways. So these are people with similar interests. So everyone wants to say, 10 people come together, they form a group voluntarily. They want to work in the direction of improving the environment of a particular region. So they have similar interests. They are independent of the government. They do not have anything to do with the government, apart from a few civil societies being registered. That also will come to, which are those civil societies. But the government does not interfere in their working. Neither do they interfere in government's working. And at times you find that they actually help government and the government helps them. But again, you remember, now you must be getting ideas. But the governments fund NGOs. What happens to their autonomy? Right? Then government bans various organizations, civil societies. That is also interference. So we'll come to all those are, say, problems, issues related to it. This is the basic idea, basic framework of what is a civil society. Then these are not for profit. Now, when we talk about the idea of profit, let me clear this beforehand so that we do not have to repeat it when we move towards SHGs and cooperatives. So there is one idea. The simple idea is that if there is this company A, it produces something, so or say it delivers some service, and in that process, it earns a profit. Now, if that profit is this profit that they have earned by selling the product or delivering the services can be used in two ways. One way of using it is put it back to the organization, in the organization. The other idea is it can be the profit is going to the owner's pocket and becoming wealth. Then another idea is this profit is equally divided amongst the members. The ones who work in the company, the members of the company get it divided equally amongst themselves. So there can be done in three ways. And also you can see that yes, they can reinvest some of the money in the organization and say appropriate rest as wealth, appropriate rest as profit. So now the basic idea is if that profit is going to that individual, becoming or generating wealth, then it is profit organization, for profit organization. But if that profit is not being appropriated by an individual or owner of the company, that means it is not for profit. So the basic motto is not to earn profit, but the basic motto is to serve the public. So public service is the basic motto and not earning profit. So yes, in functioning of civil societies, they might generate profit, but the motive is not that. It is that always public service will remain in the limelight. Also, you see that in the process, and at times the objective will be economic development. So, for example, self-help groups, they'll say that it is economic development and empowerment of the members. But again, the motto is not. It is that profit is not being appropriated by one person. It is basically in the direction of providing economic security or providing better credit options to the members. It is not profit. The objective is not to earn profit from that. Okay, getting back to it. So these are voluntary organizations where people with similar interests come together, work independent of the government, are non-profit, and this ultimately bridges the gap between the citizens and the state. Because one idea can be, say, coming together, working for something. Another idea can be vouching for citizens. So, for example, take example of right to information. Now, for right to information, there was this NGO that was working, Aruna Roy particularly. Now, the citizens are saying that there is a lot of corruption going on in our system, and we need to get rid of this. And one way to do it is you're bringing in transparency in the system with right to information, which will enhance the transparency and accountability in the system. Now, government is not coming up with that, so protest started. Now, this civil society is vouching for the citizens, is taking the voice of the citizens to the government, trying to persuade the government to come up with that law, to agree to their demands. This is what the idea of civil society, bridging the gap between state and the citizens. Similarly, other ways government is coming up with a program, it has to reach everyone, but then you do not have adequate government machinery in remote areas. Then who does it? Civil society. So government will pass on those responsibilities to the civil society, and they will ultimately take care of the implementation part. So bridging the gap between the state and the citizens. So that the voice of the citizens reach the state, and the voice of the state reaches the citizen. So why is civil society not helping the wrestlers protest against WFI chief? See, the thing is, the protest that is going on, the social movement that is going on is a civil society in itself, one thing. So any kind of social movement, just try to fit it in this structure. If you talk about, say, any kind of social movement, think about this wrestler movement. Now they are coming together. They are coming together voluntarily. They have a specific objective. They have similar interest. Now that objective that they have is specific, might not look like public service, but you see that it is with respect to a section of the society which is being oppressed by another. So they have those things. They are not for profit. They are not even registered. They are autonomous of the government. They are non-political at that. So they fit in the definition of civil society. So that wrestler movement itself is a civil society, and also there are various other organizations coming together to help them, for that matter, in the protests. Okay, getting back to it, so it can act as a bridge between the government and the citizens. Now, this can be organized on a regional, national, or international level. But these can be limited to a region. You might have, say, a group of individuals or a group of young school-going students working to, say, plant saplings on every Sunday. It can be a form of civil society on a local, regional level. Then it can be a national organization, the examples of Pratham, the examples of Asha. Then it can be an international civil society as well, wherein you can talk about Oxfam, you can talk about Save the Children. Now, another thing is, when we are saying this, inadvertently, we are trying to think mostly of the NGOs and various organizations like that, the big organizations. But we have to understand, even your social movements, even a social movement which is happening online. Say think about Me Too movement. It started somewhere and it became an online movement. So even a social movement which is online is a form of civil society. Yes, generally the idea that we get is that of NGOs and the various protests and activists that are there, because we find a lot of activists for various reasons they go on protesting. So that is the general idea that we have, but it is way more than that. And you do remember, so you have to try to fit it in the definition of the civil society. So yes, if NGOs are registered, are they still civil society? Yes, because registration does not mean that the government can interfere. Yes, the government can regulate, because ultimately government is regulating everything. Even if you talk about a social movement, ultimately it happens within the legal framework. It happens within the legal framework. There are restrictions. So if the wrestlers are there sitting there protesting, they're doing it within the overall legal framework. So I hope you get it. Okay. So these are various features of civil society. And why do we need civil society? The significance, you can simply understand that one is that India is a representative democracy, and to convert this into a participative democracy, we need civil society. What does that mean? Right now we have our politicians, we have our elected leaders who represent us in the parliament. Now, rather than relying solely on the representatives, why can't people themselves become a part of this democratic process? So to convert it from a representative to participative democracy. Why is that important? Because with the rising power of the state, with the increasing gap between the common man and your elected leaders, this becomes important. The gap has to be filled by civil society. And similarly, government does not have reach to every single place. Government does not have that hold on the ground. So to help government with various developmental activities, civil society comes into picture. Then also you'll find, I think that point is not mentioned. You can mention it here. You can mention that why do we need civil society? For various developmental activities, because government cannot possibly reach everywhere, and we need someone to help them with that. Then also you see that if we say the power of the state is rising, they can come up with various laws which are not for the betterment of the individuals. So to counter that, to hold the government accountable, to protest against it, to keep the demands of the citizens at the forefront, we need civil society. Ultimately, if you see that with the rising power of the state, even democratic countries can become despotic, because there is absolutely no challenge to the government and they can do whatever they want. So to avoid that situation, we need the role of civil society, so that there is always a check and balance. Now also you remember, when you approach this, you do remember that the idea of state, and I think we have discussed it previously as well, the idea of state, that we say that the state has been formed to achieve the objectives, or to keep the citizens or the people at the center, and achieve the objectives that have been commonly agreed upon. So basically, the state should reflect the will of the society. But we generally find that the state does not. And increasingly, with the increasing complexity of state and with the modernizing forces, we find that the will of the society comes at last. It is not being given due priority. So to make government understand its responsibility, to make will of the society, will of the people prevail, we need civil society, so that our democracy can stay vibrant. So this is the basic significance of civil society. Now, in what different roles do you find your civil society? In what different roles? So it can be in the form of policy advocacy. There can be a certain section whose rights are being infringed. For example, children. Now, to enforce the rights of the children, to make people aware about it, to go for policy advocacy, in the sense to pressurize government as well, they can work to ensure that this section of the society does not get oppressed, does not get harassed because of various reasons. Then they will also lead to a protection role, and there will be a slight overlap. When you talk about various roles, there will definitely be overlap. So you see that they can play a protection role, protecting a particular section. Then they can mobilize your citizens and resources. That, for example, there is any kind of developmental project of the government, or even if it is not there, to make people aware that this is a need that should be fulfilled, because otherwise, say, cleanliness, sanitation. That sanitation is a basic requirement for a healthy lifestyle. If you do not maintain these standards, it is detrimental to your health. And even if the government is not doing anything, why can't we come together and do something about it? And let's construct toilets across the village. So to make them aware and to mobilize them to take action, civil society can play a role. Then they become active partners of the government in development. That they help government in implementing those programs, and not just implementation. It is not just limited to implementation. It covers design as well. That they contribute to the government and help them with the design of the policy. So, for example, I've given you the example of Pratham already. Similarly, there are various reports that are being brought about by these NGOs, which the government can use. For example, your multidimensional poverty index. Now we have national multidimensional poverty index, but otherwise, the multidimensional poverty index can be an example of say international civil society helping India, and not just India, but across the globe. Then similarly, they can work for the promotion of transparency and accountability, and this can be basically understood in terms of a check on the government, a check on the unabated power of the government. So you have various examples mentioned here that you can go through. Then it can work as an educator, educating the citizenry about their problems, about their responsibilities, about their rights. So they can work in that role as well. You need not worry. You do not have to remember any role. All you need to understand is the broader framework. What all is encompassed in this concept or this idea of civil society. That is what you have to understand. Because ultimately, the question that they are going to ask is going to be on a specific form of civil society. But this broader framework will give you a perspective as to how everything is interrelated as well. Now let's look at a few issues faced by civil society. Now, looking at the features, you can realize that if you are forming an organization, if you want to work on something, the first thing is you need money, you need finances. So one problem is going to be lack of adequate financial resources, because these voluntary members who are coming together might or might not be from well-off sections, from well-off families. So where does the money come from? Also, these people have a shared interest, but that does not mean that they have a shared or a similar professional level. They might not be skilled, because you can be the perfect enthusiast about environment and might not know how things work. You might not be skilled, which becomes a problem. Then also you see that if the way the funds are used within these organizations, the way they approach various issues becomes problematic, because a lot of them will have a political overtone. No matter what, they'll go on either supporting or opposing the government. Then the entire purpose of civil society is defeated. Similarly, you see that they have finances, the way they use finances, how transparent is the system, will also create a problem for them, because if they are not transparent in the system, who will invest in them? So there can be various issues with respect to the civil society. Also think about the interface between the government and civil society. So we say that they do not interfere in each other's domain. All they do is they help each other. But you find that wherever they intersect, wherever they meet, there is going to be a problem, because the civil society might tend to move into the domain of politics, and the state might try to intervene and get into the domain of civil society, which can become a problem. So the state might feel that why are we being questioned? Why are we being opposed for everything? Similarly, the civil society might feel that why is the government cracking down on us heavily? What is it that we have done wrong? And any government, or anyone for that matter, leave government, anyone for that matter, would not like dissent. So if the civil society goes on dissenting regarding, say, any of the government policies, they go on vouching for some other section, it can be right or wrong. That is a different question. Whether the demands are right or wrong is a different question. But wherever they meet, wherever there is this interface between government and civil society, it becomes a problem, because no one trusts each other. Both are skeptic of each other. So the government feels that they might create problems for us. Similarly, they feel that government will go on interfering in our business and would not let us conduct everything properly. Now, this you have looked at the issues. What can be the solutions? Just think about solutions. Now, what we'll do is ultimately we'll look at the solutions when we talk about specific civil societies, because right now general arguments would not help. If there is a question, they'll ask about specific things. But still, you look about or think about financial resources. So financial resources, the funding can come from private players. The funding can come from the voluntary individuals. The funding can also come from the government. Then also, if the staff is not trained, why not train them? Very simple answer. If they do not have accountability and transparency in the system, why don't you regulate them properly? Why don't you say monitor their performance and everything, whether they're efficient or not? How is it that they are using those funds, etc. And in this regard, you have Foreign Contribution Regulation Act with respect to NGOs that is discussed in your economy lectures, but we'll just give you a glimpse of it. Then wherever this, so regarding this government and civil society interface, one idea is that both have to be tolerant. There should not be trust deficit between them. And the second idea is no one should actually enter in each other's domain, because if your civil society enters the domain of public policy, what do the policy making experts do then if they are to make policies? Yes, you need suggestions from them. You need them for evaluation, because civil society actually are the best ones to evaluate any policy. And when we talk about policy, you find that if the person or if the organization which creates the policy, if they are going to evaluate it, it becomes a problem, because they would not be impartial in that attempt to evaluate the policy. They'll only look into the positive sides of it. So we say that these civil societies can play a brilliant role when it comes to evaluation. That will come to, that is towards the end of our discussion. Now let's talk about the first form of civil societies, that is non-governmental organizations. What are these what are these NGOs? That will come to, but look at a few stats. So a Central Statistical Institute says India has close to 33 lakh NGOs. But your NGO Darpan, I think you would have heard of this portal where you can actually register yourself as an NGO. NGOs have to register themselves and apply for funds, etc. from the government. According to NGO Darpan, 1.6 lakh NGOs are there. So why do we have this huge gap? The thing is, not every NGO will register on NGO Darpan. On top of that, not every NGO is registered. Yes, we generally call those as NGOs which are registered, but yes, you do have NGOs which are not registered. Because again, a group of 4, 5 people, 10 people working at a very local level for betterment of the society, where do you make them fall? Yes, they are a form of civil society. And again, you can say that they work like NGOs. Maybe they're going to provide services, etc. to the people. Now coming to what are these NGOs? These are legally constituted organizations which can be registered as trust societies or private limited not-for-profit organizations. And here I've mentioned the 3 acts: the societies, trust, and the charitable companies, the way in which they can be registered. Now these are again voluntary groups who operate independently of the government. The government does not interfere. These are nothing to do with the state. They are not profit oriented, and the purpose is public interest. But they can again be funded by the government. They can be totally or partially funded by the government. But with this, you might already be getting this in your mind, that if the government is funding these NGOs, how can they be autonomous? Because funding might lead to an abrasion of that autonomy. And this is one of the arguments with respect to government funding. Yes, not for profit, as I've already explained, not for profit or non-profit organizations are the ones where it is not about, the objective is not to extract profit out of that organization, but the objective is to serve the public. Those are your not-for-profit organizations, and not-for-profit companies are registered under the Companies Act. Now they work at grassroots level. At the grassroots level, there are 2 things. One is they are working at the grassroots level, providing services, etc. Also, they're working with people at the grassroots level. That they have people coming from the, they have ordinary people who are coming to help them, because it is generally a group of ordinary people who do so. Yes, you can question this by saying that NGOs are not always started by these voluntary members. They can be started by an individual, and maybe later on people join, and you find a lot of affluent and the rich and the powerful starting NGOs for that matter. Now, if you see, the World Bank identifies 2 kinds of NGOs. One are your operational NGOs, and the other one is advocacy NGO. Now, what are these operational NGOs? They basically help the government in developmental projects. They help with the design and implementation of various policy. What are those? Operational NGOs. Then you have advocacy NGOs, which primarily work to influence the policies and practices of the government. So one is going to help the government in the developmental process, and the other one is going to influence the government policies, etc. So operational and advocacy. Do you have to remember this? No. You just have to understand that there can be various types of NGOs. There can be other categories. One can be international NGOs that have already given you example. International means they are working in various countries across the globe. Similarly, you can have activist NGOs. Now, you might find a confusion between activism and advocacy. I'll give you a brief idea. You don't have to remember anything. The brief idea is when you vouch for a policy, you say that this is a good policy. This is, say, if you say provide the poor with electricity connection, this is going to be good. So then you go on, say you go discuss this with the government. You advocate, you try to mobilize people in support of this view, and you basically advocate doing this. When it comes to activism, activism is basically acting on it, acting on that part. You believe in some idea and you act on it. You believe that you want to become a civil servant, then you by studying to act on it. So you can have advocacy NGOs and activist NGOs, but more often than not, you'll find that they are one or the same thing. The ones who are basically advocating, say, rights of minorities, etc., they are the ones who take up the role of activism. They are the ones who mobilize people to get this thing done, to get any kind of rule or process passed. So these can be various types of NGOs. Now let's come to the most important part, which is the significance of NGOs. Why these NGOs are important? Now you can directly take from the significance of your civil society, because ultimately they are working in the direction of development. They're going to help the citizens. They're going to help the government. So if you look at this significance of NGOs, divide them into two. One is their significance for the government. How are they helpful to the government? And then how are they helpful to the people? If we talk about people, people get to hold their government responsible, accountable. These NGOs will help. For example, RTI, I've already given an example. They will help in increasing the transparency in the system. They'll go behind the government, saying that you need to be transparent about the way you are using these resources. So increasing the transparency, holding them accountable, ultimately leading to good governance. Similarly, they also help people become human capital, social capital. The idea is that these NGOs at times mobilize people and scale people to take up some act. For example, building of community toilets. What is this example? This is an example of mobilization of people, ultimately leading to something, creation of something better. So they do convert these people into human capital by investing in their health and education, by working on the levels of their nutrition. Then they also help them form social capital in forms of various infrastructure, etc. Now they become the agents of government for the people. So they are agents of people for the government. How? That they take the voice of the people to the government. So for government, they are agents of the people or representatives of the people. Similarly, to the people, they are representatives of the government. So thereby affecting both sides. So also, it is an effective non-political link between the people and the government. What is the political link then? If we say that civil society is the non-political link between the people and the government, what is the political link between the people and the government? Because what are the other ways for people to raise their voice to the government? Yes, your ministers, MPs, MLA, great, your political parties, your political leaders, right? But they are political in nature. Because generally, what do you do? If you have some problem in your community, you either call or you go visit the local corporator and ask them to address your issues. But again, that is a political way of doing it. This is through civil society. You can raise your voice without getting those politicians involved. Now, for the government, one idea is that they have broadened the scope of government. They have broadened the scope of development for the government. Now, government, without having to have extra administrative machinery, they can reach remotest of the remote villages in the country because of the presence of NGOs. Similarly, if they help government here, if the government does not have to basically invest in this part, then government can invest elsewhere. So government will have increased flexibility in terms of utilization of resources. Then also you find that these NGOs are very efficient. So say if the government wants to run a program that will take 100 rupees, these organizations, because they are working at grassroots level and they're highly efficient, because they are going on with work with contribution from the volunteers. So if you're volunteering for some work, you put your heart and soul in it. One idea. Another thing is they have limited resources, so they have to learn to use those limited resources for the maximum benefit. So say if for a developmental program, government would need 100 rupees, government can transfer say 20 rupees out of it, which will be more than sufficient for these organizations to implement the government program. Why? Because they're highly efficient. So which helps government in reducing its cost, in reducing the amount of resources that it has invested. Then also they help the government with policy formulation. So they will be analyzing various implementation programs. That yes, the implementation is happening, but what is the outcome? What are the problems related to the implementation? The government gets those inputs and ultimately acts on it. Similarly, these are the people who work on the ground level. They are the ones who understand the people better than the government. They know what are the actual demands of people from a particular community, and they take these demands of these people to the government, because government otherwise would not know. So it is beneficial for the people because their demands have reached the government, and it is beneficial for the government because government is also able to take care of their citizens. Also, they help the government conduct a meaningful dialogue. What does this mean? There's government which is highly professional, highly administrative in its setup. Then there are common people who do not understand that level of sophistication. Now, if the government has to understand those people who are not professionals, those people who are poor, who do not have those sound development, who do not have those soundly developed concepts, but ultimately their voice has to reach the government. The government should know. Government will use these as intermediaries, so that whatever government says, they can simplify it and let it flow amongst the masses. And also, whatever the demands of the masses are, they can make it structured and present to the government, thereby conducting a meaningful dialogue. So these were the various benefits of NGOs, or benefits for the people and for the government as well. Now, with these benefits and the features that we have gone through already, you would have realized that what kind of issues that they are going to face, because they'll have limited funds, because it is coming directly from people or from the voluntary contributors. So there is always going to be a crunch of resources, crunch of funds, and this funding is not just highly distorted. It is coming from various segments. It is not uniform, and also there's no security. The system is not reliable. That you might have money today, but you will not have tomorrow. There's no guarantee. Also, to find that the organization, any kind of organization who's going to fund these NGOs, would want these NGOs to actually work for their betterment, reflect their will in the work of the NGO. They would want that to happen because they're investing money. So be it government, be it any private organization, which becomes a problem, which becomes a wall in maintaining its autonomy. So if you get money from people, from individual donors, it is fine. There you do not have any guarantee, you do not have any security. But say the government says we will provide you money as per the phases of implementation, we keep providing you money. But there your autonomy comes under question. Now similarly, the government goes on interfering. We say that the government should not interfere with their work, but the government goes on interfering in their work. Big brother attitude of the government. Now again, you lack an overall policy framework for these NGOs and your various civil society organizations. Because if there is a policy framework, then the aspect related to regulation, the aspect related to funding, what are the issues, what can be done, various programs, everything can be mentioned all in one place with proper analysis. But we do not have that kind of policy framework, and it is a high time that we look into this direction, because ultimately they're playing a very important role in helping the government achieve these developmental goals that we have decided as people. Now, lack of transparency in the use. So first idea is yes. So first idea is the lack of transparency in the use of those resources. They do not disclose. And if you remember, a lot of NGOs were shut down on this ground, that they were not able to provide reports of their funding. Then again, this funding, this lack of transparency in funding impacts the funding as well. Because if an organization is not working transparently, no one would want to invest. Because if you give me 100 rupees, you'd want to know how that 100 rupees spent. So because of this lack of transparency, this becomes a problem. So just limited resources, etc. And also the funding depends on the kind of activity, because there'll be a few popular ones. There'll be a lot of NGOs working in the direction of education. There'll be a lot of NGOs working in the direction of say cleanliness, environment. But then there can be other things where you would not find a lot of NGOs. So there's the funding is on the basis of the kind of activity that they are taking up. Because ultimately the organization who's investing, they would also look for their benefits. For example, your educational companies, they generally tend to invest in various free education programs, etc. because they're related to the same field and they have to spend less on those. Then they do not have any apex organization. And you can think of this. Right now, we have multiple NGOs. Say this is the dimension of education. This is education, and you have multiple NGOs working in the field of education. Say this is an NGO which distributes books. Or maybe this is one dimension of your education wherein you distribute books. Now you'll find to distribute books, there'll be multiple NGOs that are available. There will be a lot of overlap, but there won't be any coordination. Because what will happen if they do not coordinate amongst themselves? Today, people from one NGO will go and provide the books, and maybe a week after, some other NGO will go and provide the books. So it would not benefit everyone. So there has to be coordination between these, and this lack of coordination also becomes a problem. Then you have they can become a security threat. Foreign funded NGOs, there are chances that they can reflect the will of some other organization that is sitting abroad, and maybe that is the reason they're funding these NGOs. So these can also become a security threat. Then we were talking about this. This will come to under suggestions. We'll come to this again. I just wanted to explain. So there's no apex organization. That means if there is an apex organization, it can regulate the entire framework. It can help them coordinate amongst themselves, which we do not have. Then we have large number of NGOs, but the size is small, which is both beneficial and problematic. You find that these small NGOs, these small size NGOs are actually good because they work on the ground. Their spread will be more. They'll be available in more and more number of areas. Whereas if you look at say a bigger organization, it might not have that kind of reach. But also alternatively, you find that because of these smaller organizations, funding becomes a problem. Not everyone is able to get funding. It is not the system is not very say effective. They're not able to implement these policies or the policies of the government effectively. Also, you find that with these small number of NGOs, what happens is with the absence of an umbrella organization, they go on working in the same direction, in the same region, and for years altogether, and they would not even cooperate amongst themselves. Now, NGOs are just used by government to reduce the cost. As I told you that they are economically efficient for that matter. So government using them, outsourcing its own responsibilities to the NGOs is also one of the challenges that these NGOs face. And then there is xenophobia. Xenophobia is basically what? Basically fear and hatred towards something that is foreign. So yes, there are a lot of foreign NGOs who are working in India. So people will have that feeling of that they are foreign, they can be a threat to us, and people would not want to engage. Similarly, if there is a foreign funded NGO, even the government becomes skeptic that is it something wrong that they want to do in a country. This is what xenophobia is, and the xenophobia ultimately impacts your funding, because why would someone want to impact? So these are various problems, issues associated with NGOs. What we'll do is today we'll wind it up, and tomorrow we'll have a look at these suggestions, and with that we'll try to highlight the issues again so that it is a quick revision for you. So today we have discussed what is civil society, what are its features, issues, challenges. Then we started with NGO, looked at NGO's features, various types, examples, and now we were talking about issues. Tomorrow we'll start from here. That is what can be the basic suggestions, various suggestions to fix these issues. Xenophobia is basically the fear and hatred towards something that is foreign. That is what xenophobia is. Okay, then so let's conclude for the day, and we'll start our discussion from here tomorrow. Thank you everyone, and have a good day.